Gordon the Big Engine was known in the Thomas community as the express engine for the Northwestern Railway and being the prototype for the LNER A1 class by Sir Nigel Gresley. As time went on, fans started to believe that Gordon was a class known as the LNER A0s. Now, that's not true. Audrey did say that Gordon was indeed the prototype for the LNER A1 Pacifics, but never stated indirectly that he was an A0. What do I mean by this? Well, let's go over a few points, shall we? Looking at this passage from the iOS book, the following two key points say, as now running, Gordon represents points of particular interest. He was built at Doncaster Works as an experimental prototype for Mr. Gresley's 462 for the Great Northern Railway. He was used experimentally till all the defects had been cured and the first batch of Pacifics had been prepared in 1922 to 1923. By the year of 1923, Gordon was no longer needed, thus was sold to the NWR with a spare boiler and firebox. When you look at these two key points in this very passage, it clearly states that he was an experimental prototype for Mr. Gresley's A1 class for the Great Northern. And in this second key point, it also goes over on how he was euthanized as an experiment until the first batch of the A1s appeared. And if you look closely, you can see that there's no mention of the A0s. Just a text saying Gresley's 462 for the Great Northern, referring to the A1s. Another thing I want to point out is that when I searched up the LNER A0s, this was what I could find. A site featuring a pair of drawings that seemed to be some sort of draft. The section was in was dubbed Gresley's A0 Pacific, which means, and let's say hypothetically, this is the A0. And since there are people out there that claim that Gordon's an A0, this means that Gordon wouldn't look like this or this, but rather this. Now you can say that Gordon was this and was used like this experimentally, which led to this design, or maybe this. However, it's said that these drawings were chucked away and new ones were put into place. Not to mention that people associate these drawings with Henry when he was in his old shape. So doesn't that mean that Henry's an A0 then? But drawings aside, this is where I get into real life territory. In real life, Great Northern was the prototype for the LNER A1s. Now, because people think that being a prototype of the A1 equals an A0, wouldn't that mean that Great Northern's an A0 then? Thus contradicting real life records? Because apparently being the prototype of a Pacific class means an A0? Like, how does that work? And this is where I get to the quote-unquote logic behind the quote-unquote A0 thingy. Now, from what I've seen people commented how Gordon's not an A1 or an A3, but is an A0, and they treat the A0 differently from the A1 and A3, just so they can justify the TVS model, which they shouldn't really take seriously, because the TVS model was based off of Reginald Dalby's illustrations, which, need I remind you, were inconsistent with the engine's proportions, and were also inaccurate according to Audrey. And you know, claiming Gordon as an A0, while treating it differently from the A1 and A3, kinda takes away an important element of his life in the Railway series. In the book, Enterprising Engines, Gordon learns of the fate of his brothers and sisters on the mainland. When he fell in depression, this is where we meet his family, the Flying Scotsman, his only surviving brother of the A1 class, with most becoming A3s with the exception of Great Northern and himself. Now, remember when I said that treating the A0 from the A1 A3 takes an important element from Gordon? Well, here's what it took away. It took away Gordon's relation to Flying Scotsman, making Flying Scotsman's visit pointless and irreplaceable, because if the A3s and the A0s are different locomotive designs, that would mean they are cousins, and Scotsman's visit could be replaced with any other engine like Mallard, Green Arrow, any preserved Gresley locomotive out there, and still nothing would change. Now, I'm aware that not everyone treats the A0 and the A1, A3 differently. There are some that saying that the A0 is a nickname for Gordon, which personally I can accept because it's a nickname, not an actual class. And like I said, treating the A0 differently from the A1s and A3 takes away that more in-depth connection he has to his brothers and sisters, and his joy when he sees Flying Scotsman. And I like to think that deep down, Gordon still sees some bits of his brothers and sisters through Scotsman and himself. Whew, okay, I feel I rambled on long enough. Let's get on to my final thoughts on this. Now, I don't mind the A0 thingy being a headcanon thing or an AU thing. That's perfectly fine because it's that, headcanon. I don't believe it's necessary to refer to Gordon as an A0 just because he's an experimental prototype, or just a prototype, let alone that of Gresley's A1. To be honest, I don't believe that these are the drawings that Gresley would have used to build Gordon, because it says to be a 1915 draft, likely thrown and chucked away. And some fans say that this is what was used to build Henry, so it's very likely that Gordon was built from the 1920 A1 draft, still making him an A1, because I don't believe Gresley would have kept those old drawings that people claim that Gordon is. He would have likely just chucked them away and make new ones. Besides, Gordon being the prototype isn't really important, since Audrey put that in just to make it more interesting. But what do you guys think? Is he an A0? Are the A0s different from the A1s? Or are they just a nickname for the class? Let me know what you think. Till then, cheerios.